Stephen, how are we doing? We got a quorum? Are we ready to get going?
Yeah, and I don't think we need a quorum per se for this meeting. And I think I just saw Councilor Rosner, Council President Rosner has his hand up.
Um,
So, oh, let's see. Ah, there's Tim. I was just going to ask if you were going to be sitting in for Mayor Mays today.
I am. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, I think, oh, I see Councilor. Okay, he's on his way up. Welcome, Councilor Rippey. Are you sitting in for Mayor Truax today?
Yes.
Great, welcome.
Well, should we get this going then? This is a Washington County Coordinating Committee workshop. This is one of them on the 2023 Metro Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP, and updating our policies. And this one specifically today is Climate Smart Strategy Updates. I hope you got your reading credits for the attachments that were in the agenda. There was quite a bit there. I see Chris is here, Steve is here.
Mhm.
Basically, I thought, Chris, isn't Kim Ellis going to be joining us?
yes, Kim is sharing the presentation today, and I'm just checking the attendees list. And I don't see her there. So I'll text her again. But we can give a little introduction about what the purpose of the meeting is today. And let me text her again.
So, and really the purpose for our discussion is to really load up our representatives, right? And I think Commissioner Fye is here. And for the next RTP meeting, Mayor Callaway let me know that he's going to be out of town. So I'll be sitting at the big kids table instead of in the auditorium. So it's really loading us up with your feedback on these particular policies. Basically, there's a lot of material in the climate strategies, and then basically getting us grounded. That's really what we're hoping that Kim's presentation will do, is kind of give us all the same kind of background. Hopefully you've read through that stuff. And then the big discussion questions obviously are around which climate reduction strategies best align with priorities and policies in your community. Do you have questions about the past and current legislative and policy directions for the climate reduction programs? And are there new or updated policies and additional carbon reduction strategies that are not currently included in the climate smart strategies that should be reflected in the updated strategy? And then also, what opportunities do you see for the region to move forward? Should our analysis show we need to do more than just more to meet our VMT per capita reduction targets and climate goals? So that's the list. And look, I stalled long enough. There's Kim. Hey, Kim. I was gonna have to start juggling bowling balls and chainsaws or something there.
Yes.
Kim's been with Metro for I don't want to say a long time, but she's been there a while, and she's been deeply engaged in this material for her time there. Kim is well versed in this. I'm sure if we have any questions, she'll be able to get us to which particular page we have a question about pretty quickly. Kim, do you want to get us started with some background in your presentation here?
Yeah, and I thank you, Mayor. I'm really excited to be here. I think Chris had asked me to share a PowerPoint, so I don't know if that's still what you would like, or whether you would like me to do, because I will try and deliver it very quickly and efficiently, because there is a lot, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to share this work, and happy to answer your questions, hear what you have to say today, and then also if there are things that I can't answer, I can follow up after today's meeting as well.
Yes, thanks. And
So-
you're okay sharing you want to share your slides?
Oh, okay. I didn't expect
Yeah,
to
I
do
know.
that, but I can get it pulled up here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't send that to you. I, as a quick poll while she's pulling those up, how many, we found at the TAC on Friday when Kim shared this, there were only 3 of the 20 people there that were around during the Climate Smart Strategies development and remembered the history of it. So we all found really helpful to have the history and context for how we got to where we are and what the requirements are from the state and where we go from here. So I think that there will be, I think that's going to be true from across the region, that folks may not be remembering what happened 15 years ago. So thanks, Kim.
Yeah, no, and does this look okay?
Yeah,
Yeah, great. Okay. So, I would first want to just start that there's been a long history of working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate pollution from transportation in Oregon. This timeline really starts back with Senate Bill 100 and the state land use planning program, also the 2040 growth concept adoption in 1995. And while those efforts were not directly related to climate reduction, those actions really have set in place for Oregon and our region to be making great strides in meeting the state mandated greenhouse gas reduction goals. Climate Smart came out of state legislation back in 2007, or started in 2007 when the legislature adopted statewide goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from all sectors, not just transportation. And that kicked in motion other work. 2 years later, House Bill 2001 was adopted. That bill basically directed our region to develop, adopt, and implement a greenhouse gas reduction strategy for reducing emissions from light duty vehicles, which is basically passenger cars and small trucks under 10,000 pounds. So SUVs, pickups, but that's also affects some smaller commercial vehicles. And set in motion a lot of planning activities at the state level, in addition to the planning work that we did to develop the Climate Smart strategy, which was a 4-year process that we started in 2010 and ultimately was adopted by JPAC and the Metro Council and with broad support in 2014. Following the 2009 bill, that also directed ODOT to develop a statewide transportation strategy for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That work happened. The commission accepted the draft statewide transportation strategy in 2012. They ultimately adopted it as a component of the Oregon Transportation Plan in 2018, at the same time that we finished updating our last regional transportation plan in 2018. So that was sort of on the Oregon Transportation Commission side. And so there's a lot of work that happened around that. We worked with ODOT and DLCV to develop our strategy, because also at that time, targets were being developed for our strategy to meet while we were actually doing the planning work to update or to develop our strategy. LCDC adopted targets for the year of 2035 in 2011. Our strategy was adopted in 2014, exceeding the target that was set, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then in 2017, LCDC further updated state rules to adopt targets for subsequent years after 2035. So now we have a set of targets for our region to meet through our Climate Smart strategy through the year 2050, because that was the out year of the statutory goals that were adopted originally back in 2007. And then subsequent to that, there's continued to be rulemaking at the state level with the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities rulemaking. And then more recently at the federal level, there is also rulemaking underway that will direct MPOs such as Metro, as well as departments of transportation like ODOT, to develop targets and strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there's been a lot of state and now federal work towards this that really led to the adoption of our original strategy, and then it was incorporated into the Regional Transportation Plan back in 2018, and that we'll need to continue to demonstrate that we're meeting the reduction targets as part of this current Regional Transportation Plan update underway. So the background documents that were included in your packet has even more information about all these bills, but this is like at a glance. Here's all the state level rulemaking that's been directing our work and implementation of the work at the regional level, but then also at the local level. And these are the targets. So when it was first adopted back in by the commission in 2011, our 2030 target was for 20% reduction. For this coming RTP update, we need to demonstrate a 30% reduction. And a couple things that's really important to be clear about is that these reductions are in addition to greenhouse gas reductions that were anticipated by the state to happen as part of the transition of the fleet and technology of vehicles to cleaner fuels, electrification of the fleet, and other things like that. So really, our work is aimed at how are we implementing our land use and transportation plans in ways that are helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions through a VMT per capita reduction, and which is in addition to again what was anticipated to occur from the changes to fleet and technology, and that while it's on a per capita basis, it also is on a trajectory that the state agencies determined would make it so that we were on track to meet the total reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that had been adopted by the legislature back in 2007, that were to try and get to a 75% or greater reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below 1990 levels, which at the time, that was the Kyoto protocols that were adopted by the legislature by 2015. And in developing the climate smart strategy, our platform and starting point really was the 2040 growth concept and all of what each community in our region had been doing since the 90s to implement the 1995 2040 growth concept, and to do so in a way that wasn't just trying to get to greenhouse gas reductions, but achieve all of those other goals that locally and regionally that we've all been working very hard to address around vibrant communities, equity, clean air and water, and economic prosperity, and expanding transportation options in the region. So that has been a core part. As we went into the planning work for developing the climate smart strategy, we really didn't know whether we could achieve the reduction targets that had been set by the state. And so, and they were developing the tool for us to do the analytics to be able to do some of the analysis around it. So it was a very, while it was very policy driven and outcomes driven, there was also a lot of technical work over that 4-year period to really understand what it would take to meet those goals and targets, whether we could actually do it with the plans that we had in place and the path that the region and local governments were on. And the good news is that we found that there were many ways that we could actually demonstrate meeting the target, that our land use plans were working and helping us get there, but there would be more things that we would need to do, including investing more in the kinds of strategies that really lead to reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. We looked at transit under community design, having walkable communities, expanding transit, we had looked at options that actually looked at pricing of the system to see what effect, and these represent different levels of ambition around each of these policy areas. Also, travel options programs, commuter programs were part of it. Using a technology, intelligent transportation system as a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then we also did look at some additional fleet and technology changes In the end, we tested multiple combinations, 144 different scenarios, more than 90 of them met or exceeded the target. In addition to showing that our land use plans really provided a strong foundation for this work, we also found that no one strategy can get us there. So we can't get there just through fleet and technology. We can't get there just through pricing, but we really have to be implementing a variety of strategies that will help us get there and to really figure out what really made the most sense for the region and that supports community plans and visions as part of that. And so those two documents there really document a lot of the research and analysis that we did getting to that. As we also did, and part of that is trying to understand, well, what are the strategies that are really going to help us have the greatest potential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And not surprisingly, vehicle and fuels is a key strategy. But again, that is what the state had given us as our starting point. And so our reductions were in addition to that. Pricing was also another big strategy that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We included some modest parking pricing in our adopted strategy. And we also included pay-as-you-drive insurance, which at that time was something that was starting to get more traction. And the statewide transportation strategy envisioned by 2035, 100% of households in the state would be using pay-as-you-drive insurance. Today that's not really the case at all. So that, so that's an example of a strategy that we included, but things have changed since 2014 that as we want to think about updating it. Community design, walkable communities, compact urban form, really being strategic about urban growth boundary expansions, which the region has continued to do, and transit was another core strategy that was found to have one of the largest potential greenhouse gas reduction potential, is particularly in combination with the land use plans that had been in place. We also found that these three strategies here had, while not as significant as those earlier strategies, these also provided moderate reduction potential that were important parts of supporting those other strategies. So building biking and walking connections, expanding commuter travel options programs, individualized marketing, car sharing, and other strategies around that. And then system management and operations, which includes the variable speed limits, transit signal priority, signal timing on arterial corridors, ramp metering, and then also incident response and detection were also a part of that. And not surprisingly, and as well documented in other research as well, is that adding capacity to the system does not have a significant and actually has low carbon reduction potential. But it doesn't mean that we're not making strategic capacity investments in our system, but we need to be really mindful about them in ways that make sure that they're helping support getting to those broader greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so, going forward, and as part of the climate smart strategy, the emphasis was really on those high and medium impactful strategies. Central to climate smart is transit. The region went through a lot of discussion at the JPAC, MPAC, and Metro Council together about what was most important, and transit really turned to be a core part of the strategy. And the discussions as the strategy was being finalized were about how far can we push that as an individual strategy. We, in the end, Climate Smart called for more transit investment than what was in the financially constrained regional transportation plan. But it was a conscious choice of JPAC, MPAC, and the Metro Council that this was so important to the other parts of our 2040 growth concept implementation and other equity goals and other regional goals, that it would be a centerpiece to Climate Smart. We, in the end, the Climate Smart strategy that was adopted, again, had transit as a core center point, and I'll highlight some of the other strategies as well. But the other conscious decision at that time was to go above and beyond the 20% reduction that the state had asked us to accomplish. The Climate Smart strategy, we were able to show would achieve a 29% reduction. And that was in part because at that time, Climate Smart was being developed. There were concerns about whether we would actually even achieve the transition to the fleet and technology that the state had assumed in advance of, as part of setting our targets. And so the policy discussion at that time was wanting to hedge our bets as a region. The region was very committed to meeting these goals, but to do more on transit and some of those other strategies in case the transition to fleet and technology did not come to fruition. And some changes have been happening, but there are some key parts of the state assumptions around the transition that are not happening. And so that is still sort of a concern as we go forward into updating Climate Smart. And again, it wasn't just about meeting the greenhouse gas reduction goals. The strategy that was adopted because it supported so many other goals, and some of the analysis we were able to share around reducing household costs, business costs, improving performance of the transportation system, reducing air toxics and other air pollution, as part of this, that there were a lot of health benefits, economic benefits, in addition to the climate equity and safety benefits. So this is a very brief description of Climate Smart, but it really has all of the pieces, elements of all of the policy areas that were described previously, and then two strategies that are continuing to work towards funding, because it wasn't just about having good plans in place, but we actually need to implement the plans that we have and finding resources, because we have not been investing in our system in the way that is helping us get to the climate goals, but other goals as well, and that we need to continue working on that. One thing that I think is really important, Mayor Dillon, you said here at the beginning that this process, it was a 4-year process. We had very extensive, broad engagement all across the region. Many of these organizations and the agencies here were all part of the process throughout development of the strategy and getting to the recommended strategy at the end, and have continued to be engaged at the local and regional level and state level in advancing its implementation. It was a very extensive process. And in the end, Climate Smart was adopted by JPACT and the council with very broad support regionally of the elected officials at that time. Part of the strategy is also ongoing performance monitoring, and so and reporting back to the state on how we're doing. One thing that I haven't really touched on is some of the technical details of the model at the time. We did not use that tool as part of the 2018 RTP update. What we reported back to the state at that time was basically reflecting on what did we say we were going to implement and how are we going about doing that. Our monitoring is if we find we're not implementing or achieving the reductions directed by the state, that also informs whether we need to make some mid-course adjustments or refinements. And so the work that we're going to be doing to update the Climate Smart strategy as part of this update to the regional transportation plan will be using the same or similar tool as what was used to set our targets, so we can do a more apples to apples reporting back on how we're doing and whether we're on track to meet the broader 2050 goals. What we found back in 2018 is we were making satisfactory progress. We were exceeding some of the things that we said we would be doing, but we did fall short in some of these areas, including completing our active transportation network, increasing walking and biking and transit mode share, and reducing our vehicle miles traveled, which is something that'll be centered to the work that we're doing as we go forward. But we also recognize we need to do more work, and funding is going to be needed to help implement the programs and investments that are being called for. And then, as we're going forward, since 2018, a lot has changed, and that's really adds more to why it's important for us to be updating Climate Smart and figuring out whether the path we are on is still the right path, or do we need to make adjustments. The reality of climate change and the sense of urgency is growing. We're having wildfires, extreme heat, the effects of it are getting very much more real than they were back in 2014. And COVID-19 really changed how people are traveling, how goods and services are being delivered in the region, declining transit service and ridership, in part due to COVID, but also operator shortages that are happening. And there's more electrification of the fleet, making it more affordable. Safety is of top concern. Our fatal and serious injury crashes have been increasing, not decreasing. And there's new state rules that are now saying, well, we still have the same greenhouse gas reduction targets for our region, but they basically, we need to demonstrate we're reducing the equivalent of that in vehicle miles traveled per capita under those new rules. And I already mentioned the federal rulemaking underway. So we've been working since 2018, and this is described a little bit in that background material, to develop an analytical tool. What we used back in 2014 was called Green Step. It's now called Vision Eval, but this has been a tool that ODOT has developed and now has more federal and state support, and that it is helping develop it for further use in our region, as well as in the state and in other parts of the country. But it will help us in being able to report back more directly on how we're doing. We also convened a climate and transportation expert panel earlier this summer. And that work was really important in just sort of acknowledging that there is no perfect analysis tool. Likely we'll need to use more than one. So we will be using that Vision Eval, but also MOVES, which is the federally EPA approved emissions model that we've used for many years. But that we need to continue working together and really figure out what it is we want for our future, and then work together as we're updating the strategy to get there. These are just some of the next steps in the process, but we are excited to have the workshop on Thursday, where JPAC and Metro councilors will be able to really start to weigh in, ask questions, as well as start to talk about what are the strategies that are really important locally, regionally, that should be priorities as we look to update the strategy, and that we start doing more analysis to help show where we are and where we may need to close some gaps in meeting the state requirements. And then we'll be coming back next year and to do more of that work with all of you. So I'll stop sharing there and turn it back over to you for questions and discussion.
Kim, I'm going to give you credit where credit's due. That was almost insurance salesman fast for you. That was pretty cool. You moved through this quickly to give us lots of time to be able to chit and chat about it. So thank you for doing that. And folks, questions, comments? Tim.
Jeff, are we going to go through each of the discussion questions separately and stay on topic, or are you going to just sort of have it be a free-for-all? How are you going to structure it?
I thought I'd start off if folks had specific questions for Kim on some of the content, maybe they wanted to flip back to a particular slide or something, and then I think we could start working through some of the topics. Does that sound like a plan, Jason? So Tim, you got a question for Kim on the presentation?
We got two Tims with their hands up. You got to make a choice.
Rosner.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned, and by the way, thank you. That was a great presentation. But you mentioned that, and I may have heard it out of context, that at the state level, they were falling short on some of their goals. Could you be a little bit more specific about that component of it, and then how it relates to where do they expect the slack to be picked up? At the local level,
Yeah.
at the state level.
Yeah, I think the answer is all of the above, really. But so for the state policies, what I was referring to were the transition of the fleet and technology. So when our targets were set, there was a certain amount of electrification of the fleet that was envisioned, that there were changes to the fuels in Oregon to be lower carbon. Also transitioning of the fleet, where the turnover of the fleet was happening on a more frequent basis. I think the average right now is most people own their cars 10 plus years before having a newer vehicle. And what the state had assumed was that turnover was going to be happening every 6 to 7 years, which is not happening. And that's, I think, one of the areas where the change has not happened in the way that they had envisioned. There's been a lot of rulemaking happening through DEQ to get at the low carbon fuels, the electrification of the fleet. ODOT, the Oregon Transportation Commission, has an electrification infrastructure plan that they've been developing under state rules. So some parts of those fleet and technology assumptions are happening and others are not. And I think that's that they will have work to do on how they go about addressing that. Our responsibility is on the local and more regional actions to help sort of do what has been expected of us. ODOT, and I can make this available to Chris, but to send out, they did a statewide transportation strategy monitoring report back in 2018 as well, that just sort of on the land use side, we're doing well. Fleet and technology, there's some work to do. So they have been also developing, monitoring and reporting on how they're doing.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. And then just just a second question, if I may. As most of us know, there's a lawsuit against DCLD on their recent rulemaking process. How is Metro looking at in terms of considering that in the timing of this project? Because that could get overturned and they might have to go through that process again.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important and good question. So our mandates are legislatively mandated. So the targets were adopted first in 2010 and then or 2011 and then 2017. That was, irrespective of the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking, and are responding to a state legislative mandate for us to do this work. So, we're working under the presumption until such a time that there is other information that we need to meet what is expected of us as part of this RTP update, and do the review and monitoring, as called out in the prior rules that were in place before these new rules were adopted by the commission.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate it.
Tim Rippey.
Thank you, Kim, for the information. I guess my question is around VMT. Oregon prides itself on being a state with a lot of outdoor recreational venues, the coast, the mountains, attracting tourists, but attracting a lot of our local folks going out and seeing things. And so it would seem to me that it would be beneficial to have our tourism folks helping. Somehow we need to figure out how the two work together as opposed to opposing each other. So inviting people to travel to go see destinations increases your vehicle's mile traveled, not reduces it, unless you have transit options out to those locations, which currently doesn't exist. So it's just just in out apparently an obvious dichotomy here of promoting tourism and business and then wanting to reduce the vehicles miles traveled. Thanks.
Kim, I'm going to jump in on that one. And I think we had some talk about that back in the day. And to Tim's point, yeah, that does add. But I thought back when we did this original analysis and looked at that, it was more like the 90 versus 10, right? The daily commute of people is like 90 or 95% of the contribution to, you know, the loading, right? Think about, you get up every day and you go to work, right? You know, at least 5 days a week, you're probably going to work. Maybe you go somewhere on the weekend, maybe you stay home. So is that, am I remembering that right? I thought we were somewhere in that 80, 90 or 95. It was somewhere in there that we had an assumption.
Yeah, I don't recall that specific sort of distinction, but it is true that basically what we were responsible for are the trips that are within our region and within the urban area of the region explicitly. You know, I think so, and that is it's the commute trips, but it's also all the other trips that people make for different reasons, whether it's doctor's appointments, going to school, in addition to going to work. And so, that's the thing that we'll have to sort of reconcile in part, is that we need to have travel options for all of those trips, not just the commute trips. And as we know, since COVID, more people are working from home, there's more uncertainty of things. And so as we're making these, updating the strategy, to the extent that we can take that information into account, we'll need to be addressing that. And I would say, like, one cool thing that's happened since 2014 is ODOT is now offering transit service to the Gorge to give some of those options to some of those destinations. So some of that is happening, but certainly more of that would be good from a statewide perspective.
Garrett?
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Kim, and maybe it's a little too granular for this particular point, but when you use the term electrification of the fleet as being a big component, one of the strategies, but realizing that there are different fleets, such as there is the long haul fleet, there is the service delivery fleet, particularly like the UPS, the Prime and all those local fleets. There's the individual transportation fleet, there's the public transportation fleet. Do we as an RPO, or does the state as a state have specific strategies to improve and enhance the electrification process for each of those separate fleets, some of which could be different? I mean, for example, Amazon is different than, Consolidated Freightways.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Councilor Rosenthal. So the work of Climate Smart Strategy is focused specifically on light duty vehicles. So it's vehicles under 10,000 pounds. So that's passenger vehicles, sport utility vehicles, small pickups, and some of those sort of Amazon UPS type trucks that you were talking about. ODOT, and as they developed the statewide transportation strategy for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, they addressed all aspects of transportation. So it was the long haul trucks, transit, as well as the light duty and medium duty trucks as part of that broader electrification. So they are addressing it at a statewide level. And I see Tara has her hand up too, and and TriMet's been doing a lot of great work to electrify their fleet, but that actually doesn't count towards our reduction targets, but is an important part of the broader statewide transportation strategy work.
That's just what I was going to chime in and say, Councilor, if you have further question, go ahead. But yes, the focus on transit as part of this strategy is really the focus on increasing transit mode share, as well as increasing transit availability and access. And yes, though we are committed to and in the process of transitioning our fleet to zero emissions, that's not part of this strategy. Kim, I don't know if you wanted to share any more of how those assumptions are factored into the Climate Smart Strategy, just the assumptions about transition of transit to zero emissions, since as we know, we're a large diesel user, but Councilor Rosenthal, feel free to follow
Let
up.
me ask Sarah, why Kim mentioned that TriMet's transition process is not accounted in our overall regional strategy. I'm a little confused why that.
It's not, we don't get credit for those greenhouse gas reductions from that transition. It is part of, a broader regional effort, so it's accounted for, but it's not, we don't, the reduction in emissions from the transit vehicle electrification does not count towards the reduction in emissions to meet those state goals for our climate smart strategy.
Doesn't sound reasonable to me, but.
Well, it is because the state had already assumed a certain
Oh.
amount was going to happen when they set our targets. So there was already a presumption that the fleet, all parts of the fleet,
Yep.
were going to be electrifying.
Okay.
And so our piece was light duty vehicles, and it was going to be in addition to any type of electrification or other changes to fleet and technology.
Okay, thanks.
That was my only comment, just to clarify how that was accounted for and make sure credit is given somewhere for that significant transition underway, even though it's not part of the strategy that we're talking about today.
Right. To
Thanks, Kim.
characterize, maybe to restate it differently, right? That was part of the assumptions.
Mhm.
Right.
It was already assumed that the TriMet fleet would be converting to something that was zero through electrification or carbon neutral diesel or something, right? So that was part of the base. Tim Rosener.
Yeah, just real quick. Thanks. And thanks again. It's great information. On the vehicle miles traveled, I'm assuming that the definition of that's coming down from the state through legislation. Does it include, are they taking out electric vehicles since it's a greenhouse goal?
Hmm.
And how is that being accounted for in that, every time I turn around, I see a Tesla driving by, and I'm just curious, if you're counting electric vehicles in that, as that becomes a portion of that share of overall vehicle miles traveled, it seems like we're not getting a good number that tells us what's really happening out there.
That's a good question. So the definition is coming from the state, and it's household-based vehicle miles traveled, but I do think it's all vehicle miles traveled, whether it's electrified or, internal combustion engine. But I will double check that, but I believe that it is all vehicles.
Yeah, because if our goal is greenhouse gas emissions reduction, it seems like that needs to be accounted for in that calculation. Otherwise, we're missing out on, for the people that are choosing early to buy electrical vehicles, they're helping to combat this problem, and we should get credit for that as well. Thank you.
Mhm.
Jason.
Well, Jeff, I want to warn you, I'm not in question mode. I have a number of, well, maybe we can call them opinions or statements I'd like to share. So I don't know if we're at that point yet, but the comment that and the answer that Tim just got is a perfect example and segue into my first comment. But you want to go, or do you want more questions?
I think, yeah, if we've got questions on the base assumptions, that would be good. And if you think that your statement forms part of a question to the base assumptions, then maybe we could go there right now, but maybe we'll wait. And Kim, it's the engineer in me. We can go with a thumbs up, thumbs down on the by category, but maybe you can give us a little, where did we think we would be and where are we now? And I think some of them are easy, right? So transportation percentage, right? Transit is part of the load. We're not there, right? We don't think we're not as high. There's not enough people riding the bus or the MAX in comparison to where we thought we'd be at this point.
Yeah, and before COVID, we were there because House Bill 2017 it was the largest investment in transit service in the state's history. So in between 2018 and now, we were on track, and then are now not where we thought we would be.
Right. So that's really the mode share shift, right? It just is taken I mean, we're in a weird spot, right? Washington County, we've got TV Highway, which didn't go down a tremendous amount, but overall in the system, I think to what we've seen is that one's kind of been a thumbs down. We haven't made the progress. We're not on the curve we thought we'd be. Electrification of the fleet, so the 10,000 and below, thumb up, neutral, thumb down.
I think it hasn't been happening, as of 2018, it wasn't happening as fast. I think now DEQ, with the rulemaking that they've done and work that ODOT's doing, I think they're developing some new estimates of where we are that we'll learn this winter. But I think it's potentially below or maybe just right where they think we are on track.
So neutral, so we say neutral to down would be
Neutral
the
to down. Mhm.
neutral down, definitely not above. We're not
No.
even as many Teslas as Tim's seeing. It's not accounting for where we thought we'd be. So I think that's the one, not to poke a sore spot, but the transit expansion, right? I think one of our assumptions was a dramatic expansion in our transit system. And I think we're thumbs down on that one pretty clear, right? We just haven't, not only has the ridership dropped through the pandemic, but also the expansion of the total system has not occurred like we thought it would. Am I off base on that one?
Yeah, I think in part because we've had resources to do it. I think now with COVID and then more recently with the operator shortages, it's not on the right track.
So I just wanted us to kind of baseline, right, where we're at right now. It's maybe neutral or all down from where we thought we'd be from when we set these goals and our curves and everything else back from 2014 and prior. So, okay. So now that we've gone through, is there any last questions on the assumptions, the presentation? Okay, so let's jump into that first one. So that really was the first one, was assumptions or questions. You have questions about the past and current legislation, policy directions for climate reductions. Jason, are you ready to jump in, or somebody else with what climate reduction strategies best align to the priorities and policies?
Well, I'll just make a statement that, given the discussion that just happened, is probably blatantly obvious, but I'm going to restate it, that there's clearly a disconnect between many of the key assumptions and what we're seeing occur in the region in reality. And several of the key assumptions are just not panning out.
I think that's fair. I mean, Kim even brought up the one, right? If you'd asked us when we set these up, oh, everybody was going to do pay-as-you-go insurance. We just thought that was going to be, the market was just headed there, right? And it just wah, right? It hasn't gotten there. So, man, I'm just feeling like Debbie Downer today on this. So others,
Jeff, sometimes you just have to face reality.
no, and it's a tough message, right? I mean,
we can't improve if we don't acknowledge it.
No, I know. I think it's a lot about for us that are lean philosophy, right? The plan, do, check, act, right? We made a plan, we started doing stuff, we're at a check step, and it's really not good news, right? I think, the assumption on the buses getting to where they're using a carbon neutral diesel, that's great. But that was part of the base, right? We were expected to get there. Lacey, do you have something you want to jump in? You usually have some sage questions or advice.
No, I just have been watching and listening. I think I've been very opinionated about the state's stance on climate. I think our community, is one of the few cities in the region not suing the state over it. I think we need to be pushed in the direction we're going. I mean, I think I have a really progressive city council. We wouldn't have been working on some of the climate stuff we were working on had we had not been pushed. And so, I'm not the mayor that's all about local control for local control's sake. I think this is an area for us to work together on good outcomes. And I think, like everyone else, I'm waiting to see what the results of tomorrow is going to lead, because so much of our work is going to be determined on who the next governor of Oregon is. And so I know that's probably not what everyone wants to hear, but that's probably the reality of the situation.
Well, Thanks, Lacey. That was pragmatic. I appreciate that. Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, you know, just in general, to follow on what Jason was saying, you know, a lot of the strategies, I think I'm speaking for some of the edge communities in the metro region, but a lot of the strategies, whether it's coming from HB 2001 or the Climate Friendly Act or Metro's policies, don't work well in every community, and there's not really a recognition of that. You know, when we have, you know, you guys have heard me get on my soapbox about transit options in Sherwood, you know, a million times, you know, but at the same time, we're being told we can only allow for 3 on-site parking spots for a quad, you know, when there's really no opportunity for people to bike or to use transit to get to their jobs. So I think there's a disconnect in that regard, and I think we need to create more flexibility for individual communities to figure out what works for them, and given the current conditions and where we're headed.
Thanks, Tim. Mr. Bryan?
I just wanted to chime in that I think as we've been looking at this climate smart strategy update, and we've obviously been coming to you regularly talking about some of our plans to hopefully restore service. We've heard very much of the need to focus on where can we build transit ridership best when restoring service and growing service in the future. And so that part of the strategy and part of the questions we're looking at as part of this workshop is not just, are we putting enough money into transit investment and expansion, but do the other strategies we have as part of Climate Smart also guide people to transit? Because if we're putting a lot more service out there, but there's not pricing or other strategies being employed that might lead people to choose transit when they have an option. I think that's part of what this discussion is about, and what Kim and the team at Metro are looking for feedback on as well. Because yes, we're putting plans into place to expand service with the funding available and operators available, but do we have the assumptions right on other strategies that might lead people to choose transit, not just with the service expansion? So I know there are, as you've said, there are a lot of other assumptions made that don't seem to align, or we're not achieving them, but they're in the strategy right now. And so Kim, in terms of the discussion questions, are these the same questions that will be asked at the JPAC Metro Council workshop on Thursday morning, in terms of what you're looking for feedback on?
Yeah, they are. And then we're also working to have some online polling too, just to be able to, like, you know, where is everybody, you know, in terms of the room, you know, what's important to you? Because I think because these are all really important questions to be hearing from. One thing I didn't, I think, highlight as strongly as I could have in my presentation is, you know, Climate Smart. One of the things about Climate Smart is it didn't presume that how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions is going to be the same in every community, because every community is in a different place. And you know, one size fits all was a common comment, and you know, and part of the frame of Climate Smart that we really need to, as a region, work together to figure out what's important in each community, and then how is that helping, you know, achieve the regional reduction. But it is based on community plans and visions and what can be done in each community, and that it's going to look different in Sherwood, in Tigard, from City of Portland, from Gresham, Troutdale, and Fairview. So I don't want folks to feel that there is a one size or one way. And that was really what the process was about, was crafting that thing that fits and works within each community. But every community has a role. It just may be a different role or different emphasis or a different way of getting there.
That was really well Kim. Thank you for remembering that, that was one of the things is we knew that would need to be different in every community. There's commonalities, but there were going to be differences. Frank?
I wish DCLD had that same approach. Just saying.
Hey, Frank.
On the climate smart strategy assessment of greenhouse gas reduction strategies, on page 1 about congestion pricing, helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 2 things. One is I understand how, because the congestion pricing is, the whole discussion has been getting, to reduce congestion on I-5 and 205 and the diversion efforts that will then occur because of tolling. So I don't see how congestion pricing is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It basically going to disperse that greenhouse gases into the adjoining areas around these significant corridors. But we just started our climate action plan, and per the studies done here, our vehicles aren't the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases. It's our manufacturing industrial area. And I don't see that addressed here at all. So that's my question. We're so focused on transit and cars and trucks emissions. Has there been any thought of Tiger, Tualatin, Wilsonville in our manufacturing industrial area that these guys, are pumping out greenhouse gases via their cooling systems and stuff like that? Is that been included in this study or potential for the RTP? Because it's not all transit. It's also, like I said, we've got a huge emissions here in town from our manufacturing industrial area.
So it is not part of our strategy. The statewide goals that were adopted back in 2007 were for all sectors. Other people that are working on that, I would say, are probably within DEQ. And I don't know if, I'm not familiar with the specifics of work that they may be doing at that state level. I know that they've been implementing more monitoring and reporting requirements, but I'm not familiar with specific reduction strategies or pollution control strategies that may be being implemented to help get there, because the statewide goals are for all sectors, but there definitely has been a focus on the light duty vehicle piece of it in this work.
Because it was eye-opening to me, because I always thought it was trucks and cars. And it was eye-opening that no, that's not it. It's your manufacturing industrial area and even households emit greenhouse gases. That could all contribute. If we can get those down, it helps reach the goals.
And I do think there is work happening statewide around reducing in those other areas. I'm just not up to speed on it, so I don't want to misspeak or but DEQ and the Department of Energy, they produce reports every 2 years, I believe, where they're actually inventorying emissions from all sources, transportation, but also industrial development and buildings, because that's another major source of greenhouse gas emissions. So there is monitoring work happening, and I imagine that there is other efforts. I just don't know what they are.
So Frank, to your point, how about we table the buildings as part of it? That was a big discussion in the original development of these. Could I put that on Stephen and Chris? Could we get maybe the parable or the equivalent from DEQ at a later update that talks about where they're at on? Because we've talked about ours, right? We're at neutral or down on all of the 10,000 pounds and below kind of plan. Maybe we could get a future update on where they're at on their climate smart part of the equation between the buildings and industrial and stuff like that. That sound reasonable?
I think we can find out where we are on updating the overall state. Like Kim mentioned, our role was part of a bigger state, so it would be interesting to check back and see where the other sectors are.
Yeah,
And
you
see if
think
we
we
can
can
find out.
get something like that in here from DEQ at a later meeting?
We can ask.
Okay.
And the Oregon Global Warming Commission is in the process of preparing a report to the legislature, because that was also a commission that was set up at the state level as part of that original legislative action adopting the statewide goals. And so they've been also monitoring and reporting on overall progress for all the sectors. So that would be another a potential source of information.
Thanks.
Thank you. We're down to 30 minutes. I want to make sure we get through these questions, but I also want everybody to have a chance. Julie, you haven't had a chance at the mic yet.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to add that on the point of increasing effectiveness of transit and reducing vehicle miles traveled to the point of the greenhouse gases that are emitted by light vehicles, that wherever we can increase our effectiveness on local transit systems in coordination with TriMet and coordinating all of the cities in Washington County and surrounding counties, I think there's room for continued increased effectiveness of our transit systems. I just wanted to underline that again. Thanks.
And Julie, would you think, I think that falls into the first question, right? What climate reduction strategies best align with priorities and policies in your community? Would you agree with that one?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to reduce my comments to keep it shorter. I mean, ultimately, we should be updating the RTP climate smart assumptions to reflect the changing, rules that are both federal and state. I mean, that seems obvious. The RTP climate smart assumptions and related policies, we should be better aligning with actions that are generally known to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from the transportation sector. That's what we're talking about. We know a lot more than we knew in 2014. That means we should be supporting transition to EVs. I think that's why there's so much focus on the light duty vehicles, because that's like low hanging fruit. Increased transit service and coverage, transit oriented development. And I think there's probably needs to be more emphasis on transit oriented development and compact urban development, in particular, the urban form and how it can support, if the place you need to move around is easy to move around and get what you need without a car, then more people will do that. I mean, that's sort of obvious. On mobility pricing, I know Frank kind of made a comment about that, and I guess I'll just say that what I think he said is true on one level about, the tolling, but if you take the tolling and invest it in, take the revenue from that, invest some of it in transit, then you do get some impact. So I'll just leave it there. Sorry, I said so many words.
No, that's fine, Jason. So yeah, that's great. That's good feedback. Ms. O'Brien?
That is exactly what I was going to say. I wanted to go back to Mayor Bubenek's comment about the pricing. Is that an effective tool to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And I think we have consistently been pushing for, when paired with transit improvements as another alternative, then yes. And we have appreciated many of the folks around this table also helping to make that point as we talk about regional congestion pricing. And so in the context of this discussion, sounds like I'm hearing from others that yes, if pricing is moving forward, roadway pricing is moving forward to make it an effective strategy to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions and not just move it around, then we need to ensure that there is increased transit investment as an alternative that might direct more people to change travel behavior as a result. So just wanted to make that comment, but all very useful to hear about all your, Mayor Snyder.
Let me say one more thing about some of Frank's comments, and this is just additional context and not transportation directly related, but we've been doing our work similar to Tualatin as a city to analyze, and our largest contributors, we have a lot less industrial, so you got to kind of put that in context, but our largest greenhouse gas contributions as a city actually come from residential and commercial heating, with transportation kind of right behind that. So just again, when we're talking about these things, I think that is important context, but I know that's kind of outside of what we're supposed to be talking about.
And my understanding, Kim, is that this strategy is focused on the light duty vehicles aspect of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And so, yes, many of us are working on our own climate action plans for reducing impact from buildings, and but this is the reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, which often pairs with some land use investments as well. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. I cede the floor.
Tim, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to give Lacey a shot first.
I would say too, I mean, obviously, we've been writing TriMet in every meeting and every opportunity to extend services. I think you have definitely, yeah, I got the mayor's chop and Jeff is doing it too. Like, we get nowhere unless you increase transit services in our community. But I feel with this group, I've beat that to horse to death. So I'm going to make another pivot argument here when we're talking about transportation. It is not only getting people out of cars, it's also the conversion to electric vehicles. And my particularly issue in my community is 50% of my community rents and lives in multifamily housing. And so one of our issues is we can't access all the state and federal rebates to get that conversion to happen because there's nowhere for people to actually plug in an electric vehicle. At least half of our community is in that. So I think one, we're working with state legislatures on an e-bike rebate that would actually be a lot more useful for a lot of my multifamily residents that could ride their e-bike to maybe a TriMet stop. If you guys, continue to move them into our community, that would be helpful. And then looking at microgridding and what the hopefully Inflation Reduction Act can include in microgrids, so we could put solar panels in multi-use families and have it more accessible. Because if we want this plan to be actionable in the next couple of years, the reality is TriMet's not going to be our savior. I'm sorry, TriMet on the call, but we are asking you to save us with the reality that it's very unlikely to happen with the current ridership. So what are we actually doing in this plan to move forward? So that's
Thank you.
nothing on TriMet today. Sorry.
And Lacey, I'm gonna jump in behind you and cut Tim off on this. You've heard me chop, you've seen me chop on, and it's so cliche. We have to get people on the bus. It sounds so cliche, but it's got to be because they want to, and it goes where they want to in a timely fashion. And I'll saw the horse a little bit more. I did a little more look at the maps, right? Cornelius, by example, to Tim's point, on the fringe, 5,000 plus people leaving Cornelius every day. The average travel time for those folks in their cars is 29 minutes. So for every person that has the awesome opportunity to work in Hillsborough with a 17-minute commute, like I do at Ronler Acres, the biggest employer in the state, there's a balance to me. And that's somebody that's driving to Oregon City, Gresham, Sherwood, Tualatin, which is a 45-minute drive. To get your average of 29 minutes of drive, for every one of us going to Hillsborough, there's one of us going to the other rim of Washington County or Vancouver, right? So I don't know what your guys' areas look like. That's what my area specifically looks like. So I've got to get a bus, some other kind of transit that gets me in a reasonable amount of time to that trip that's currently 45 minutes in my car. It can't be 2.5 to 3 hours in transit. It's gotta be faster. And by the way, if I leave Cornelius, get on the Max, right across Portland to Gresham, it's still 2 hours and 15 minutes to get to Gresham, all on the Max. It's not fast enough. That's why people won't leave their cars. And to Lacey, your point where I thought as I'm dovetailing in, I think we share a lot of the similar people, right? I got corrected at Centro the other night. I've been talking about households with about 4 people working in it. They said, you're not enough, Jeff. It's more like 6. That's why we have so many cars in the areas where we've done high density development, right? To what Jason's talking about, right? Transit oriented development, got this real high density, but I can't get out of there with anything other than a car. So what I'm hearing and feeling from my citizens, and I don't know where you guys are on this point, if I could get to electrification quicker, right? And trickle that electrification down into the people that are actually working, right? The lower threshold of the income, not the high, not the Tesla people. I don't need people buying $120,000 Teslas. We need a sub $30,000 car, $20,000 car that's electrified. We need the grid installed to be able to support that recharging, like the microgrid, like Lacey's saying, until TriMet or something else can catch up to get us where we want to go in a quick fashion. So, okay, I'll put my box away. Tim, I cut you off 3 times.
That's okay. No problem. Lacey and Jeff, I mean, you just pounded the nails I was going to pound again, so I won't go into too much detail. But you talked about your city is the same for Sherwood. We have 9,000 people leaving town every work day to go to work, and their commute times are actually a little longer than what you're experiencing up there. I will, in electrification of the fleet, we've got to be encouraging people to make that investment. In Sherwood, we have a lot of people that can afford those Teslas, right? So, how do we get more of them to make the investments? What are the rebates? What are the credits? Lacey, your ideas about electric bikes and all that are spot on. I would sum it up to just say, if we don't make it easy for people to make those choices, they're not going to make the choices. They're going to make the choices that are more compatible with their lifestyle. And then one last quick thing.
Tim, we shouldn't think of them as choices. When they're not easy, they're not choices. I mean, I would actually say that. Like, I think your point is spot on, but I wouldn't call them choices.
I call them choices because at the end of the day, people have to choose to buy an electric car. They have to choose to take the bus. And when they have to, spend an hour and a half versus 30 minutes, they're going to make most people are going to make, unless there's a passion there, they're going to make those easy choices. But I want to say a positive thing real quick, because earlier on we talked about how we're not meeting all of our goals, and it was kind of a downer. I do want to just remind everyone, Oregon, depending on what list you look at, is 46th or 47th on the list in terms of greenhouse emissions per capita. So as a state overall, compared to the rest of the country, we're doing really, really well. Just thought I'd throw a positive out there.
Thanks, Tim. Garrett? You're not?
Just a second.
There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I find this discussion very interesting. I want to echo a little bit what Kim said and what Mayor Snyder said. Every community is different. So, this is, of course, a big challenge for each community, as well as for, of course, our staff, is each community is going to come up with, hopefully when we get into the RTP, proposals for early next year of what they think is the best series of transportation options for themselves. And as it was pointed out, it's different, for example, for Sherwood, Tualatin and Wilsonville because of the industrial area than it is for, say, King City, or it is for Tigard, or it is even for Beaverton. So I think that's going to be very interesting. And I think, as people pointed out, it's only a part of the problem. I do have one other technical question, and maybe Kim can give me, what about shuttle buses, small haul kinds of things, whether we're talking these things, are these fall into the light vehicle or do they fall into the heavy vehicles? I mean, I know that, TriMet runs, dial a ride and small scale shuttles. There's the Tualatin shuttle, there's shuttles in Wilsonville and other places. Where do they fall?
That's an excellent question as well. And I will have to do a little more research on that, because I think some of them would fall under that. It's about the gross weight, under 10,000 pounds gross weight. And so I do think some of those shuttles probably are under that, but I'm not familiar enough with the different types of transit vehicles that operate as shuttles or van pools. I think would be within it. For sure, because that's basically like a panel van or something a little larger than a panel van. And those are accounted for in some ways. And that sort of is a good question for me to go back and look at a little more closely, like how are they actually accounted for? And I know we produced information during Climate Smart that was trying to show what vehicle classifications fell within what weight range that would be or would not be included.
Okay, thanks.
Lacey?
I just, when I'm thinking about the messengers that have to carry today and our past meetings forward into JPAC and Impact and all the positions they're sitting in, I think it's important from my perspective that we create a system that has meaningful first steps. When we're doing these plans, we often, we get caught in that, especially as mayors. The last 2 years of me being the mayor, I feel like the crisis mayor. It's just crisis after crisis, and we're just responding and responding, that we often don't take the time to dream and create long-term plans. So here we are with the opportunity to create a long-term plan, and our community needs to see government working. And so we need to be able to have these like first step opportunities towards these longer goals. Otherwise, all of this planning, all the work that we're doing means nothing to people if they can't see some kind of actionable outcome in the next 2 to 5 years. And so I'm not saying the plan needs to be complete. I'm not saying that we shouldn't dream big, but Commissioner Fye, I think from my perspective, as you're my personal representative, how do we create opportunities to have immediate wins and long-term wins? And I think if we only focus on the long term, we're doing a huge disservice.
Mayor Beatty, that's a really important point. And one thing we did as part of Climate Smart is we had some near-term actions, some of which were legislative and others, in addition to sort of the long-term plan. And so that's really helpful feedback for staff too, as we're teeing up these conversations, because it is going to take transit time to get there. So what are we doing in the near term to make more progress while thinking about the longer term view?
And this is where I think it takes us, we're running low on time, but are there new or updated policies or additional carbon reduction strategies that are not currently in the Climate Smart strategy that we should reflect in the update? And to me, I don't know if we're in an alignment, Lacey, or not, but I almost feel like for the money I would take to buy, if it was my choice, right? Buying one new TriMet bus, and Tara can probably tell us how much that is. I wonder how many Nissan Leafs I could buy, just in economy, and literally just lottery them out to folks that qualify for low income replacement. Would I get a better climate improvement, right? Would I be, not at the detriment of TriMet, but am I getting to a bigger impact quicker if I take a policy where I'm super rebating, not just rebating electrification, but super rebating? Like, right, we've in Washington County, if you are very low on your income, we will almost completely pay for to replace your old wood burning stove to get you something that's lower carbon. Should we be looking at the same thing for electrification of the fleet for vehicles, right? If we could move 10% of our lowest income folks that are driving 29, 35, 40 minutes every day to an electric vehicle, because we don't have the infrastructure and the TriMet system to get them there, would we be better to spend the money there? I mean, to me, that's a revolutionary idea to move it along. Is that something the group would want to move forward? I got my finger on you, Tara. Maybe you can give me that bus price.
Well, I think it's less about the bus price as the cost per rider and the number of cars on the road as a result. And so we focus on balancing where we serve on really the cost, keeping the cost per rider low, so that the investment for a new electric bus, which is roughly $1 million, is a cost-effective investment by getting more people on that bus. And so putting dollars into getting more people on the bus will also keep more cars off the road. But I had wanted to raise my hand just to share that we hear you with regards to the need for express transit and that people are traveling further distances, and that when there is an express service from a job center to another area that has to be a lot fewer stops. And so that's not a high capacity transit project, but that is something that the STIF regional coordination funds and shuttles are focused on being able to look at where the needs are and provide as well. And so I get that transit doesn't work for everyone depending on how far you might have to commute. But that that part of the focus of that regional coordination shuttles is to look at potential express services, and that I've very much been communicating back to our team that there is an interest in that. It is more challenging to operate shuttles like that and from TriMet because it's often less cost effective to do that when it is just a few trips per day that are express services rather than productive service of picking people out throughout the day. And so Metro has acknowledged the need that people are traveling longer distances as well. And so it's something we're definitely talking about, and I think will likely come up on Thursday as well. So I just wanted to factor that in. I'm happy to run some numbers for you on cost per ride for various transit lines if that is useful, but it's very much one of the factors that drives where we make decisions about increasing service as we're working to increase ridership and cost effectiveness.
I want to thank you for making my point for me, Ms. O'Brien. Your presentation says people will, on average, will only ride 45 minutes. It's an hour from Cornelius to Hillsborough. We're not getting people on the bus when it's that long, right? If I get on the bus in the morning, it takes me an hour to get to Rondler Acres. That's just Google it. It's basically an hour trip from my house to Rondler. That's a 17-minute drive. And I'm not sure that the 33 Leafs that we could buy wouldn't be more beneficial. Or even the next challenge is maybe it's not $1 million electric bus. Maybe it's an electric van. That way we don't have to get 147 people on the bus to really optimize it. Could we get 10 people in an electric van and make a big deal difference? I think these are some of the revolutionary ideas we've got to look at that I'm seeing, but I don't know where the rest of the group is. Anybody else? Comments? We're down to our last 6 minutes.
I'll jump in since I haven't really participated yet. And, I echo kind of the comments and kind of the participation of Tim and Lacey kind of earlier. King City, it's difficult because we are also in a transportation kind of void. And I think through COVID too, what we've seen is the societal shifts, right? Pre-COVID, a lot of people worked downtown and they socialized downtown and they lived in the suburbs. And we have seen that great shift that, now a lot of my residents aren't going downtown on the weekends, right? They want to go to Beaverton and go to the food pods or go see the new show at the new, art center, or they want to.
Yeah, they do. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Right. But, and so that's, I think what's interesting is that we've just seen a great shift in the suburbs of kind of the transportation, live, work model and all that. And Jeff, I kind of like your idea. I would love to see what are some really outside the box, innovative things that other cities are doing that, we can come bring it back and have that conversation here, because I kind of agree. I think we need to broaden the scope of the discussion a little, look at, I don't even know what innovative outside the box projects are out there, but I would sure love someone to come tell me, right?
I'll throw one more crazy one out there that people have been bringing to me. And we experienced it when we went to the All America Cities thing. Downtown, and this is going to sound like something maybe you've heard before, you could jump on and off the bus for free. You didn't have to worry about a fare. So we rode the bus around downtown Denver to get to places, right? Because there was no cost, no ticketing. The whole idea of it was just convenient and it was ubiquitous. So I don't know if there's something to be said about that too, that, I mean, I don't want to take all the air out of the room, but Kitzhopper showed us through the health plan and his work that if you don't charge people a deductible, they will go to the doctor sooner, but they will get a better outcome in their health. Maybe if we didn't charge people to get on the bus at all, would more people ride the bus?
We had a Fairless Square.
And people rode the bus around Fairless Square. But what if it was just fairless? Tara's head just exploded. Did you see it? But no, I mean, those some of those ideas, right? I mean, really, how do you just put zero burden? I don't have to get a low-cost fare pass. I don't have to deal with anything. I don't have to have translation services. I can just get on the bus, period, and ride.
Well, that's a certain percentage of our revenue source that would no longer be available. But if that is something you all are interested in advocating for, I'm happy to discuss further. I know I won't push one way or the other.
What else you guys got? What other strategy should we be going? We got electric bikes, rebates for electric bikes, electric cars for the economically challenged. What else should we be putting into this policy that isn't there now, that'll help us get to our goals?
I think for
Lacey.
me, it's more about inspecting what we expect. So, I mean, I have a cajillion ideas on how to bring electric cars and rebates and all of that into our community. What I would hope to see is where we come back and check in with the plan at, you know, really like year-long intervals. We know government is smaller, but like a report out to the community. Here's what we accomplished this year. That's what our community is asking us for, and all the work that we're doing, not just in this particular area, but really how are we telling the story to the community about the work that we're doing? Because I think what I hear a lot, and it's probably heightened because it's election season, but people really saying that government's not working, it doesn't work for them, they're not seeing themselves in government. And the reality is we're terrible storytellers. So how do we put in to inspect what we expect, what we're asking of this? How do we come back and tell the story, which requires work and it requires, you know, regular check-ins. But I think to me, you know, my city, we have a really great climate action plan. We know the direction we're going. I think most communities do. We've already told TriMet what our hopes and dreams and desires are. They know they're working towards that. But I think it's that meaningful first step and coming back and making sure that the plan is working and creating off ramps for things that aren't working. So many times we write policies and when things aren't working, we just stick to our guns. And so if something's not working, how are we letting ourselves an off ramp to focus on other things?
So what I distilled out of that, Lacey, was we need a quicker plan, do, check, act cycle for it, right? We can't wait since 2014. It's been 8 years. We need to be doing like an annual review. What's going on, making tactical changes in that plan. Tim?
Yeah, I think that the storytelling comment I think is really important. I would add to that, and this gets to your comment of plan, do, check. People want to see results. I mean, they're used to hearing the government be aspirational all the time, especially in election season. And they generally want to see the results. They want to see how it's going to impact them. And we need to be better about making sure we're prioritizing projects that get those results to some extent. Understanding there's long-term goals too. But in terms of just random ideas, how about EV only lanes or no tolls, assuming that happens for EVs. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we can be encouraging that stuff.
I've always questioned our honesty and our integrity around saying freight mobility without a willingness to give the freight their own lane on the freeway.
That's a good point.
What else you guys got? We're down to the last minute or two. We didn't talk about reducing the VMT per capita, but I'll be honest with you folks, everything I've read, everything I've seen, people live where they want to live and they work where they have a job. I don't know how to get them to work closer, right? I mean, so many of my people work in Tiger Twalt and Sherwood, Oregon City, Gresham. I wish they had a job in Cornelius. We're trying to get more industrial, but even as we put more industrial in, I don't know if I get more of them working here.
There are, Mayor, a lot lot of other trips that are made on the system that aren't commute trips. So just going back to something that I said during the presentation, like a third of the trips, or there is a share, and it's a smaller share than all the other trips people are making on the system. And so that is where land use and transportation can help reduce the VMT per capita for many of those trips, and some or many of the commute trips as well. So it's really trying to think about it from all of the trip purposes and reasons people are traveling, and what are the options people have available to them to make those other kinds of trips.
Closing comments? Thank you, everybody, for showing up, participating in the conversation, sharing your ideas.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
hope Nafis is ready for a giant report out on Thursday. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.